But everything that I've made so far has always been just clear in my mind before writing it or actually filming it or editing it. And it is all driven by emotions. As much as I like to, intellectualize cinema and art, for me, at the end of the day, it's all about emotions. It's all about what it makes you feel. Even going beyond just cinema, but it could be paintings, it could be music, it could be sculptures, even buildings, architecture. There's something so powerful about just feeling something.
Nick, it's so great to meet you here on Zoom.
Pleasure is mine. Thank you for contacting me and getting in touch, honestly.
No, it's a great pleasure. I saw your work and I saw, some of the reels that you did on Instagram, and I thought, wow, so talented. Yeah. So tell me about you. Are you based in Vienna?
I am based in Treviso right now, north of Italy.
Okay.
But I'm currently moving back and forth from Treviso, which is near Venice in the north, to Berlin. I've been going to Berlin a lot recently for some work projects, and also I'm currently developing a new short film that will be set in Berlin. And so I've actually just come back from from a period there.
Amazing. But you're so young and you already have done quite a lot. So when did your love for filmmaking start?
Ever since I was young. It's a bit of a cliche, to just be like, oh, ever since I can remember. But I've always been a fan of cinema, just like watching a lot of movies growing up and learning more and more about how film works. There was a time around like when I was 11 or 12 where I started to understand that there were people making these films that don't just magically happen or it's just actors get together. There's actually a person with a vision, the director, who starts them and creates them and sees their visions through. And so I started making like very, very amateurish videos when I was 14 or 15 at a very small camcorder. I even made like a short documentary for one class high school, which was a fun time. And then when I started university, I was studying philosophy, politics, and economics in this, which is completely separated from filmmaking. But there was
why?
the
Sorry,
100.
why did you not? I would presume you would study filmmaking.
It was one of those things where I studied economics in high school. And we're talking about like 2016, I finished high school and started university. The world was very rocky, very shaky. And doing something that was not arts related felt like the most safe choice, just financially for the future in the long term. But when I went to university, I quickly realized that this wasn't really for me. It was one of those things where the more I studied, I appreciated the subject matters. My professors were very good generally. But just I realized this was not, like I was not meant to do any of that, like either go into politics or international relations or become an accountant or something in the worlds of economics or a banker. While I was in uni, I ended up doing an extracurricular course on the history of cinema, which just opened to classic movies, older directors and filmmakers, and just opened my passion even wider. And so I ended up making a short film for a video competition in the university, which was to celebrate the 150th anniversary of the Ca' Foscari University. And it ended up winning the main prize, which I was not expecting. Absolutely not. And that gave me the push to make one more short film completely by myself. And then I applied for a master's in film production in the UK. And then I actually did end up studying filmmaking.
Wow.
It was a hard choice to make, very hard.
Yeah.
But
because I think it's also, like you say, it's, I think also for young people now, I would almost say, the world is so huge when you start making choices of what you want to do for your career. And of course, if you have something like that, that's a passion. But you also have to be realistic in a way, and that's what what you thought of going the realistic way. But then, in the end, your passion and what you were meant to do, that it took the lead then.
Yeah, I think it helped a lot that when I was in high school, I participated as a volunteer in a short film festival near my area, which really helped me to connect with people who are working in the industry on a very, very small level. So it's not any big names that anyone's heard of, at least they're not in the mainstream. But those were all passionate people who were doing what they loved. And that helped me feel more confident in actually pursuing filmmaking, not only as a long-term passion, you could say, but just as a career opportunity. Just to meet, I will never forget, there was a Canadian animator of animated films. Never heard of him. Lovely guy. And he was aware that he was very, very small. It was not very popular or famous. But he said, like, I'm not nominated for Oscars. I'm not making millions every year, but I'm making what I love. I have a good family behind me, and I get to travel around the world and meet people like you in this small town in Italy. And he said, just that alone is everything I want out of life. And so I think setting my expectations lower really helped as well. There's always this thing that you have to do more and be more, and ambition is important. It needs to push you in some way. But I think it can be very damaging, both in the short term and the long term, because if you don't manage to have the success you hope for, which might be like very, very high, especially in something as competitive as the arts nowadays, it's only going to be damaging. So definitely that helped in making me feel more confident in what I wanted to do.
But that's great that you can realize that, or could realize that at such a young age. And I think it's absolutely true what you're saying, that, the expectations that we don't, we see people like huge names in the film industry, but, you can still do your thing and you can still tell a story and you can still make an impact on, enough people that makes it, a great form of art.
Yeah, and that's been one of the most rewarding things. It's just managing to have face-to-face conversations with people who watch my films and just talk with them. Because I don't know, one of those videos of films could get thousands of views on YouTube and whatever, 50 comments, which is good and everything, but it always feels so impersonal. It always feels so detached from reality. It never feels like something that's actually of substance in a way. So to actually make short films and then have people that I know or new people that watch them whenever they screen at maybe a small film festival, or they end up being shared by friends of friends around and they get messages and then calls about it. It's so nice. It makes it feel more worthwhile. But also I always try to, which is a good thing on a purely creative sense, but also a bad thing in just commercially speaking. But I always try to make films that I want to see. And as much as I have a very wide love of cinema and art in general, what I really, really like to make and see is very unusual, very peculiar in style. That can definitely be a bit alienating for some, but also just not commercial in any way. I know so many who want to be the new Tarantino or the new Scorsese or whatever. And those are very good movies, great movies even, but with broad appeal. And I wish I could make movies like that. I wish I could be like, oh, I want to make something very commercial that's easy to sell to people everywhere. Instead, I make bizarre, personal, experimental films, as you've seen from my catalog.
Yeah, but I think it's sometimes it's the imagination, it's it's true. It's like we all have imagination, and we all think, "What if?" or "Would it be possible?" You know, things like that. And you are able to do those thoughts or those ideas. You are able to do it visually, so you can put it in film, so that people could see.
Yeah, and it's always I watch too many movies.
Mm,
That's a thing. I try to watch one movie a day at least.
really.
And there are so many. It definitely is a rabbit hole of sorts that once you enter it, it just gets deeper and deeper and deeper. There's always a new filmmaker to discover, to study different styles. And one thing that I like to try and do with my films is to make something I haven't really seen before, which is a very bold statement because so much has already been done in cinema, despite only being 130 years old, more or less. Um, but yeah, I try to go in unusual routes. What some people would do for maybe 1 or 2 minutes, I would stretch for an entire short film. That's what I did with my most recent project, Phantom Touch. I watched the movies of Wong Kar-wai and other filmmakers that have some sequences, usually 30 seconds, 1 minute, shot with a slow shutter, a low frame rate. Everything is very choppy. It's very it has this ghosting effect that is completely alien and dreamlike. And I thought, why don't I make an entire film like that? Being well aware that it could not have worked probably because it was so odd. But it ultimately paid off. And that's what I like about just experimenting with the cinematic form, because knowing the technicalities of things helps tremendously with actually achieving the emotional resonance you're looking for. I've met some filmmakers that don't really care much about knowing how cameras work, how sound design is done. They kind of let other people do it. But I think having at least a basic knowledge of those techniques can free you up immensely in achieving your full vision, and also just communicating with other people on the set. Communication is so key in every aspect, in life in general, but especially when working on a film set with limited budget, limited time, you need to talk properly.
Everything that we lived, from when we first met to the months of flirting from a distance, ending with my trip, it's too good to be true. Something that only happens in fiction.
Don't say that. Everything that we lived together, every moment was real. As real as anything else in life.
I remember falling for you right as I laid my eyes on you. I spent so many days hoping the feeling would go away, knowing that if I started anything, it would ultimately lead to pain.
But now you're talking
again,
about the technique and then also the story. So in this case with the film A Phantom Touch, you saw the technique that you wanted to explore. So did the story then come afterwards?
In a way, yes. I had already done some test shoots like years ago, I think in 2020 and 2021 during the pandemic when everything was closed down. I just liked going around with my camera and just trying some things out. And one of the things I tried was this slow shutter effect, which I really liked. And I always had in the back of my mind this idea of making a film like that. And then last year, the story just naturally came in my head. This idea of a long distance relationship, having a couple, just reminisce about what happened in the past. And what you're seeing is their final encounter. And I thought, let's just do this with the slow shutter effect.
Yeah.
Let's just create this very magical and also just disorienting, isolating effect, which is something that I very much wanted. I thought that this could have been shot in so many different ways. This could have been shot in full color, just brimming with passion and brimming with love. It could have been just a series of close-ups, just having these two people together on screen, being intimate and tender with one another. But instead, I wanted to go the opposite direction. I wanted it to feel purposefully just sad and cold in a way. And so despite seeing this couple together at their most intimate, everything in the cinematography and the editing makes you feel distant from them. Some of the shots are taken from far, far away, and they're just little spots on the screen. In some of the shots, they are together on screen, but using a wide angle, they're just at the extremes of it. They don't really feel physically close. So it's kind of foreshadowing a little bit where the relationship would go, but also just how memory works. I always feel like memory is such an interesting aspect of humanity, of just reminiscing and
Yeah.
thinking about what came before, regrets and whatnot. And it's not reliable in any way. And so I like the idea that maybe this is what we're seeing is someone's memory from the couple. Who it is doesn't really matter, but just one of the two of them, just kind of like looking back on it and already twisting the memories a little bit. And those memories are also starting to fade away, which is also due to the effect that I wanted to achieve. I like the idea of them just kind of like blurring one into another.
Wow, it's the bits that I saw, it's really and I totally get what you're saying, and it's true that and you really explore now not just the story, but you explore the emotion and the feelings and this human tendencies, that we have.
Hmm.
So you really put a lot of thought in your film.
Yeah, I have this very unusual way of making films where I genuinely cannot start a project if I don't already see it in full in my head.
Mhm.
I've tried before in the past. I was just like, I have an idea. Let's try it out. Let's see if it works. But then whenever I got deeper and deeper into the film, I just couldn't see it in my head, and I never actually finished any of those projects. But everything that I've made so far has always been just clear in my mind before writing it or actually filming it or editing it. And it is all driven by emotions. As much as I like to, intellectualize cinema and art, for me, at the end of the day, it's all about emotions. It's all about what it makes you feel. Even going beyond just cinema, but it could be paintings, it could be music, it could be sculptures, even buildings, architecture. There's something so powerful about just feeling something.
I have been feeling your phantom touch every day for the past weeks. When I lay in bed and I feel your absence, I close my eyes and whisper your name. Suddenly I can feel your hands on my skin, and the pleasure I experienced that night, God, it comes out to the surface. I have to open up my eyes to break the spell and remind myself that I am alone. I'm so glad you came.
And then, yes, you can have explanations and why something's happening, why were they created and how, and different interpretations. But I think just the first approach should be, at least for me, I like it when it is purely emotional. And that's something that I try to create and achieve with my films. Even ones that are more abstract. I've made some like tone poems, you could call them, that are just like images put together with very unusual, peculiar sounds in the background. And I've had some people just tell me like, what does it mean? What does it mean? Like, does it mean anything? What did you feel? I felt discomfort, or I felt nostalgia. I'm like, there you go. That's all that matters to me. It's not really about explaining it in any way, because I think everyone in their own way, even for movies that don't necessarily get or understand, I think deep down they do. Even if it is a feeling of, I just didn't like it, it just bored me.
Yeah.
It is. I think we all have good opinions on what something is, and I think playing and focusing on emotions is kind of key, at least for me.
And film is also a great, a film is a collaboration really of a lot of things. And you as an independent filmmaker, you have to sort of coordinate all these things.
Yeah, it's always a long process getting a film done. And generally speaking, more often because of just necessity, not for a lack of trying. I've worked with skeleton crews, sometimes to the point that I was the only crew there, or more or less, or working with like 2 or 3 people. There is definitely a level of purity to it that I really appreciate, that I really like. Of, you get 1 or 2 actors, you get someone that helps with sound, and you just go somewhere and shoot something. It feels very personal and very genuine, and it almost becomes a bit of like temporary family during those hours of days of filming, because you're spending so much time together making something that is fun but also very demanding. And I always try to have every shoot as relaxed as possible. The actors are usually the ones most vulnerable because they are putting their own bodies on the film, and a lot of people focus exclusively on that in a way that I get. But they're very vulnerable, and so I like to shelter them a little bit and protect them and comfort them. But even with the rest of the crew, I always like to take breaks. I don't like to overwork people. When it's time to have lunch, we're going to stop and have lunch. We're not going to push it for like 1 or 2 more hours of filming just because we might get 1 or more shots. It's like, it's never worth it. Never. You need a happy crew. You need to treat people with respect and care. I think this applies in almost every job, I would say.
Exactly.
Which is one of the things I found fascinating doing some like normal jobs, let's say like non-filmmaking related jobs over the years, and then working on sets, either my own sets or someone else's set. It's all the same. It's basically all the same. The power dynamics, the hierarchy of power, and all of that. Respect is so important. Clear communication and respect are just key. And more often than not, it's not present on films, and I understand why. There are so many different variables that you have to take into account. You could hope to have a shoot last only 3 hours this day, and then you have, I don't know, bad weather, for instance, or someone gets sick during the production, or you don't have the right light. Like, it could be anything. There could be any reason. The camera breaks down, the SSD is too slow with saving the files. Like, it could get very technical as well, but everything could potentially slow down the shoot. And so to take it out on the people that are working really hard, and especially on a small scale, like my projects, often for free or for very minimal pay, unfortunately, I mean, you cannot even demand too much. So.
And like you say, there's so many variables, the weather and many other things, but also how creative are you when things don't work out? So I can, like you say, it's small budget films, but how many times have you had maybe a vision of how it's supposed to be, but you just don't have the budget for it? So can you come up with a plan, or can you make a sort of a change to adapt to something?
Adapting is so important, and I've had to adapt so many times, almost on every single shoot, because of so many factors. I think
so you can think on your feet, you can think in the moment.
Yes, it's fascinating just how my body reacts, because before the shoot I'm always incredibly stressed, and I can just like feel it just eating up on me, thinking about everything that could go wrong and whatnot. But then once we actually start filming, and once I'm there, whenever there is an issue, I'm like keeping my calm, take it slow, think, and find a solution. And so far it's always worked, but it can be incredibly stressful. There was one time when I was in uni, I was making a short documentary, and I needed 2 actors to basically reenact some scenes for this documentary. It was something about dating apps. And I found 2 actors that were interested and willing and open to shoot. We plan the day, we do rehearsals, I get the equipment, and the day before the shoot, both of them drop out of nowhere. For no real reason. I still don't know why they decided to drop out. And then I was almost going into panic, but I was staying in a student residence and I made some friends there. And one of my friends just had his girlfriend over to come visit, and we were talking about the film and the project, and he knew about it, and he offered to help out if he could, to just like star with his girlfriend in the film. And I was like, yes, please. I'll take it. I'll take it. Yes, yes, yes. And it ended up being way better than if we had actors playing in it. So, happy accidents. They always happen.
I
on
believe
set.
in happy accidents. Yeah. No, I
Yeah.
always believe if things like that happen, it's, the outcome is sometimes, well, most of the times better than
It's meant to be.
than you would have planned. Yeah. But we talked to you. You mentioned also about the budgets and so on. So you also have to have a business sense, because you must probably apply for funding or get funding in a way and in advance, because before the film is even earning money, you have to pay out money. So how good are you with this?
I am still improving on that front, mainly because the types of projects that I've made so far are of zero interest to any type of backers or funders or film funds, because they are so just out of the way they're usually made. Speaking of Phantom Touch, for instance, it was very much a passion project for me and something that I wanted to make regardless of whether we got funding or not. And it was actually a very quick pre-production as well, but I knew it would be something that those who watch it might appreciate it, but on a purely like mainstream scale, it would not be of much appeal because it's so different. If it were exclusively about the style and the visual experiment of it, it would be very much, like, oh, it can work as a video art or an experimental film festival. Or alternatively, if it were about just the romance and the story, it can be kind of like a Before Sunrise type of film. People love those, they're very heartwarming and tender. But to actually unite the two things together, the experimental style and the more conventional narrative, it's not accepted nor recognized by both types of like strands of filmmaking, you could say. So it's too weird for normal festivals and normal film commissions to fund, and it's too narrative driven to qualify as video art or anything like that. It's one of those very weird weird things. But I feel like with Phantom Touch, it was my biggest project yet then, and just in terms of scope and script and everything, it felt like the end of an era of sorts. I'd shot so many films in Venice as well, and it's almost symbolic that the last shot of the film is a German actor, the German actor just like on a train leaving Venice. And now I've been going to Berlin more and more. And I've already made a very small piece of video art in Berlin 2 months ago. And that's going to be released in a couple of months from now, around like September or October. And now, as I said in the beginning, I am working on a new short film in Berlin, which similarly, it's not, it's something that I'm very passionate about, but it's going to be a bit more conventional. It's going to be like a proper film, you could say. But it's being made with all the bells and whistles that make a production cinematic and proper. I have a very talented DOP that's helping out. I have a makeup artist, intimacy coordinator. There's going to be set assistants, a script supervisor. Like, it's going to be around 20 people in total to manage, which is a big group for a 4-day shoot. But I feel like I'm growing more and more with each project that I make. And this feels like the biggest jump that I've had since almost starting out. But I never wanted, kind of like going back to what I was talking about before with the ambition, I never wanted to put too much pressure on myself to prove something. I've met some aspiring filmmakers that always want to start out with a bang. But nowadays, everyone's capable of making a film with an iPhone, with an Android, whatever. Just like shoot something, you put it on TikTok, millions of views, and that's it. So the competition is strong. It's insane, honestly, even. And in that sense, I've always been happy doing my own thing, well aware that it's not of large appeal, but I think that has helped me get more and more confident directing and being behind the camera, sometimes in front of a camera as well. And so now with this film, I'm hopeful that it will lead to bigger and bigger opportunities. And just starting to play the game a bit more. I feel confident playing the filmmaking game, of the funding, applying to festivals with like proper strategies for something that can actually work for people worldwide.
Mm. And I think it's so important nowadays, like you say, we always look at the numbers on social media and the following and so on. But I do think we are moving more towards smaller communities, but authentic communities, where people are really interested in what you are doing and they are loyal to you and your work. And I think that's almost for me more important than a number, to say I've got so many thousand followers or so and I think your support also grows with you and evolve with you as your work evolves.
Yeah, you start making a name for yourself. People become more accustomed to your style as well. And I'm very happy that even though I'm not making the same type of film every single time, I think you could even say that every single movie I've made so far has been different in one way or another, whether for the stories or the way it's shot. But I've had some people that have been following it, like my career, for the past 6 years now, which is crazy to think about how much has changed in 6 years.
Yeah, but that's amazing.
Thank you.
I just want to, with Phantom Touch, am I right to say that Sarai Vangeli de Cressy did the music?
Yes.
Amazing,
I know she was interviewed.
Yeah. And because this is how I came across you. I think you've posted something or she posted your film or so on. So how amazing also she's a young composer and that you could collaborate like this.
Yeah, it just felt right. We met
Did you
back
know each other? Did you know each other before?
From a previous project, yeah.
Okay.
Right after the pandemic, I started working in a museum in Venice, and there I connected with a videographer in the city who was working in the art scene, and he ended up hiring me to do film editing for a documentary about an art restoration project that was happening in the city. And Sarai was the composer for that documentary, and that's how we connected. And as I was doing the editing, we often had back and forths, about like the timing of the music or the type of music we needed, where to put it in the film, sending rough cuts and all of that. And we just stayed in touch. We worked very well with one another, and it was a fun experience. We also met in person for the documentary's premiere, which was nice. And then, I was working on Phantom Touch. I was originally thinking of doing the music myself because I'd made it for other projects as well, usually more ambient type of music. But for this film, it felt right to have a proper composer create something that's memorable and something that just fits the emotional beats of the narrative. And that's when I contacted Sarai, who did an incredible job in, I want to say, a month or less from when I contacted her to when I got the full soundtrack. It was impressive, yeah.
So did she see the film, or did you explain the concept to her, or how does it work with composing for film?
It all depends on just how early you get the composer on board and depending on the project you're making. But for Phantom Touch, I was editing the first draft of the film. So without music, without anything, kind of more of a linear narrative edit without anything special about it. And that's when I contacted Sarai and I just told her about the story, first of all, and the project, how it was made, and if she could be interested in creating the music. And once she said yes, she had to wait for me to finish the first draft. And then I sent it to her, telling her kind of like, okay, you can see the visuals, you can see the style, you can hear the voiceover, but there's no sound effects. Some sequences were still like work in progress in terms of length, but I told her just, start building something and we'll take it from there. And so she started out first creating kind of a leitmotif or a theme for the film. And then she expanded on that once I locked the picture itself, so that there was like no more edits. It's like the film is done, no more editing. It's 18 minutes and 56 seconds or something like that. That's when she actually ended up creating the full soundtrack, being like, okay, so here it's a bit more quiet, so you can hear the dialogue more. In this moment, you see them, touching hands for the first time, so the music swells a bit and increases in intensity. And we had this constant back and forth, just kind of like fixing some parts or improving on others, or just, it wasn't even that much needed because she's so talented and good. But more often than not, I was just happy. I was just happy to be listening to it and seeing it in the context of the film.
That's so great. And it's, I think in this type of things, like you say, in filmmaking, where you have to work with so many people, it's so important that you get somebody who understands what you're doing and that, can really, because the music in a film is always such a great part, for helping to tell the story.
Yeah, it can make or break it. And especially for this film, which again plays so much with the emotions of it all, if the music was non-existent, or even the opposite, it could have been overbearing, just like way too loud, way too kind of like feel something, cry, laugh, that type of thing. I think she managed to strike the right middle ground. It has a very somber atmosphere, which is something that just fit with the piece, something that I liked. And it was also fun to just have, for a film that's almost entirely dialogue in terms of sound, which is something I've never done before. In that sense, it's almost my most experimental film because I'm not a fan of dialogue per se. I think more often than not, you can just cut it, the actors and the feeling of the scene can help without actual talking more often than not. But this film was all dialogue, was just a conversation for almost 18 minutes. And so the music didn't really have wasn't a main character, let's say, until the end of the film, where the dialogue finally stops and you have the two characters on screen just dancing this long dance throughout Venice, almost prolonging the inevitable separation at the end. And that's when Sarai's score just kicks in full gear, and it's the only thing you hear. And I think it delivers that emotional punch that I was hoping for. That just
amazing.
It's better than if we had, license for whatever song that could have fit in the background. Something that I tried, something that I toyed with was maybe getting, a pre-existing song to just put in. But to have the original piece and to have this explosion of music after it being so restrained and subdued beforehand also fit narratively in the context of the film. And it was just fun for Saraya, to just let loose and be the only thing you hear in that moment for 2 minutes.
No, I think it's the perfect fit. I think the music and the film and everything works together perfectly.
Thank you.
But Nick, tell me what are the wishes now for you for the future? What is the next projects in your mind, or what would you hope to do?
I'm hoping that this new short film that I'm working on, it's titled Never My Love, and it's a horror romance. I'm hoping this will be it will definitely be my biggest film yet in terms of scope and in terms of just crew and cast. I'm working with experienced actors, experienced crew members. I'm hoping this could lead to new opportunities in the future. It's an idea that I've had for 5 years now, about about a peculiar couple that has some cannibalistic powers of sorts. But it's all going to play in a way that's very tender and reassuring. I love all genres of cinema and I love horror as well, but I think it's so easy for it to feel exploitative or to linger too much on the blood and gore and, again, exploitation of the actors and the bodies on screen. And so with this film, I kind of want to challenge those notions and create something that's a bit more romantic and heightened. And I have an idea for a feature film it's too complicated to make by myself. So I decided to make this short film kind of as a standalone project, but also as a proof of concept. And I'm very excited about it's coming together. We have special makeup effects. I saw like an actor had to get a cast of their chest and shoulder to do some of the practical effects. So it's going to be very special in more ways than one. And, you know, if it turns out as good as I hope it will, hopefully that can lead to an actual feature film coming together with proper funding behind it. Because it's such a weird story that it's very, very hard to sell unless you see it. And so to go to someone and just be like, hey, I want to make this film and just show them a script can be a bit weird, a bit off-putting. But if I actually have a 15-minute short film and say, hey, this is basically, you know, the opening of the film, it would have this tone, it would look like that, I think that can help secure more funding and actually get the film made. So in terms of wishes, that's my biggest wish right now, is that hopefully this film can open new doors in the future. But even if it doesn't, just getting it made is such a personal achievement for me. And every movie, no matter how big or small, is a miracle. Like for whoever makes them. And that's always something that I say to young filmmakers or people that want to make films. I always tell them, just like make one. It doesn't have to be shot on the fanciest camera with the most expensive equipment. Just make one with your phone, with your friends, shoot it for 1 or 2 hours. It lasts 5 minutes. No one else has to see it, but just make it. And I think in the process, many realize how hard it actually is for something that's very simple. So let alone for something that's more complicated and demanding. And so, yeah, no, I honestly, every project is a miracle for whoever makes them. I've become way more generous and forgiving of bad movies sometimes, unless they're like very truly unwatchable. But I think making films myself has just made me more understanding of the process and the complexities and of how things can go wrong. So
and I think it's like you say, you learn from every film that you make. You know, you learn, and it's a stepping stone to the next one and to the next one. And you have to make it, you know, even if you look back, you know, sometimes people would say, oh, I look back at my first painting and I think, oh, what was I thinking? But you had to do that, you know, you had, and I think sometimes people are hard on themselves, but I think the first work is always the most purest work.
Yeah, there's something so genuine about them. I don't tend to rewatch my films unless I'm like sharing them for someone or I'm creating like a show reel. But there's even a couple of, there's like one movie that I'm not very proud of, but in a way I'm happy I made it in a way that I'm not happy with, so I could understand like what doesn't work. And primarily it was related to just finding the right collaborators, kind of going back to what you were talking about with Sarai. Like I knew Sarai and I knew we had similar work ethic, so it only made sense to work together. But for other people that I don't really know, at this point, it's even when I'm creating a cast or a crew for a project, it's less about what they think about the film itself, which, you know, everyone has opinions. Everyone can like or dislike something. But I really, really like to just meet them. Like face to face, we're going to grab a coffee, a tea, or maybe have lunch together, but I just want to meet people. And that was actually what I did in Berlin for the past 2 weeks, was physically meet with everyone that's helping out on the project. Not only for me to feel closer to them as we're doing a lot of pre-production from afar, from remote, but also to just ensure that those are the right people to just have on set. You could have, I don't know, like whatever professional person with 20 years of experience help you on a project, but if you just don't get along, those days of planning and of action are gonna be rough. Really rough. So I'd rather have, which could be, you know, counterproductive in some way, but I really would rather have just good vibes and a good set where people get along and there is just understanding of what we're doing, more so than getting someone that could be very expensive and great and amazing and whatnot, but, you know, can cause issues. And that's what I've had in the past on an early project. And I've said, never again, never again.
No, and
But
I
again,
think,
if I didn't make that film, I wouldn't have grown, like you were saying.
and I think it's this working together with people and this energy, it spills over on everybody. If there's not a good vibe in such a working environment where you work so close with each other and for such a long time, and you have to have patience, and you have to just work for days on end. You have to have people that's that you feel okay, yeah, you can work with them and you can get along with them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I've seen it on other people's sets as well. It just creates more issues, more problems. The final product could work. And I think that's actually an interesting thing to think about, is how much are we willing to sacrifice just to make something good, just for art? Because in its own way, I mean, like, I could have issues on the set, and I know about that, but whoever watches the film doesn't know that. And if they watch a good film, they don't care about what happened behind the scenes. It's just like, it's your problem, They don't know, they don't care. And after 50 years, if your art is still, available and readily accessible, only the art itself will be preserved and exist, not so much the behind the scenes. So it is something I've considered often. But I don't know, I think at the end of the day, especially now, we're becoming more, rightfully so, concerned about ethics in work environments, and especially in creating art, because it's so tough for everyone to make art, whether it's music or painting, just getting access to funding, like we were talking about. So I think it's even more important now to have an ethical development and creation of art. And probably the final product will show that as well, I think.
Definitely.
I try to be optimistic like that. And
I definitely. I believe everything carries an energy with them. So I believe in that. But Nick, it was so great to talk to you. I'm so glad that Sarai shared that clip that she did, or that you tagged her in, because I'm so happy to talk to you. And I really appreciate your great outlook, and you're so young and you have such a great outlook. So congratulations for all the great work you're doing and still will be doing in the future.
Thank you so much. No, this was lovely. I'm very excited for what's to come.
I have been feeling your phantom touch every day for the past weeks. When I lay in bed and I feel your absence, I close my eyes and whisper your name. Suddenly I can feel your hands on my skin, and the pleasure I experienced that night, God, it comes out to the surface. I have to open up my eyes to break the spell and remind myself that I am alone. I'm so glad you came.